Never trust a smiling toy, especially one named Poppy. That sweet little doll might be hiding the darkest secret of all. And when Poppy Playtime Chapter 5 comes out, it could change everything we thought we knew about this game. In the twisted world of Playtime Co., nothing is as innocent as it looks. Chapter by chapter, we've uncovered living toys, sinister experiments, and secrets buried in an abandoned toy factory. Now, with Chapter 5 on the horizon, everyone is asking the big question: what's going to happen? And will this be the end of the story? Today, we're diving deep into the craziest theories and mysteries around Poppy Playtime Chapter 5. From hidden clues about the final boss to whether we can even trust our supposed allies, we're going to piece together what Chapter 5 might have in store. Buckle up, because this is going to get wild. So first, let's catch up on how we got here. Remember how it all started? We, the player, returned to the old Playtime Co. toy factory after years of it being shut down. In Chapter 1, we quickly learned the toys there are very much alive and deadly. We were chased by Huggy Wuggy, a giant blue plush monster with an unnervingly wide grin. It was a heart-pounding introduction to the horrors lurking in the factory's halls. By the end of that chapter, we managed to escape Huggy, sending him plummeting into the darkness. And we found Poppy, a vintage doll with red hair, locked away in a glass case. When we opened her case, she simply said, "You opened my case," in the sweetest little voice. It seemed like we had found a friend, or at least someone who needed our help. Then came Chapter 2, and things got even more intense. Poppy actually guided us for a while, talking to us through the factory's PA system and helping us navigate deeper inside. It felt like, okay, maybe Poppy is on our side. But of course, nothing in this place stays safe for long. We soon encountered Mommy Longlegs. Remember her? The pink, stretchy, spider-like toy that treated us like we were part of some twisted game. Mommy Longlegs chased us through puzzle rooms and definitely did not want us to leave alive. In the end, we outsmarted her, and she got caught in a grinding machine. It was gross. As Mommy was dying, she screamed, "He'll make me part of him! You can't do this to me!" That was a huge hint that someone, or something called he, was controlling things behind the scenes, trying to collect these toy creatures for his own purposes. And sure enough, a metal claw snatched her remains away, our first glimpse of the mysterious prototype, also known as Experiment 1006. Now, here's where we first started to question Poppy's intentions. Right after we defeated Mommy Longlegs, Poppy thanked us for freeing her from Mommy's clutches. She sounded grateful and told us we were doing great. We thought we were finally going to escape together. We hopped on the train to get out of the factory, but Poppy had other plans. As the train was speeding towards freedom, she diverted it, saying she could not let us leave. Not yet. Instead, she directed the train toward a place called Playcare. Boom. Crash. The chapter ended with a derailment. That was the moment we realized Poppy isn't just a sweet doll. She has a plan, and she's willing to trap us in the factory to see it through. Why? We'd have to find out in the next chapters. Chapter 3 took us deeper, and things only got crazier. We entered Playcare, which turned out to be an orphanage inside the factory for children with no families. Sounds kind of caring, until you realize why it existed. Playtime Co. was using the orphans for experiments, turning innocent kids into monstrous living toys as part of something called the Bigger Bodies Initiative. Pretty dark, right? As we explored Playcare, we encountered a new enemy named Catnap, a cat-like toy that could unleash a red gas, causing us to hallucinate and relive nightmares. That red smoke was terrifying. It trapped us in a looping nightmare sequence that messed with our mind. We also met some new characters who weren't trying to kill us. A small toy named Ollie, and even Kissy Missy. Yes, Huggy Wuggy's pink counterpart. Surprisingly, Kissy Missy turned out to be helpful. At one point, she even saved us by listening to Poppy and not attacking us when she could have. It turned out Poppy and Ollie were working together to restore power to Playcare and help us navigate the horrors that Catnap threw at us. Poppy kept saying she wanted to end the violence caused by the prototype and his creations. By the end of Chapter 3, we overcame Catnap's nightmare trials and learned something important. All these giant toys, Huggy, Mommy, Catnap, even smaller creatures, were actually under the influence of the prototype. He was the puppet master pulling their strings. That realization was chilling. The whole time, the prototype, this unseen entity with a clawed hand, was watching us, learning from us, and using the other toys to do his dirty work. If you think things couldn't get worse, Chapter 4 proved otherwise. We left Playcare and ventured into some of the deepest, most secret parts of the factory. Along the way, we found a place called Safe Haven, a supposedly secure area where a few friendly toy critters, and maybe surviving victims, had been hiding from the monsters. For a moment, we had hope, actual friendly faces in this nightmare. Poppy and Kissy Missy were still with us, guiding us along and helping where they could. But then we encountered Dr. Harley Sawyer, also known as the Doctor. This guy was actually a human, or what was left of one, the very scientist who created the living toys in the first place. Dr. Sawyer had twisted himself into some kind of cyborg monstrosity and served as the main antagonist of Chapter 4. It was like facing the evil genius behind all of this. We went through intense battles and puzzles to stop Dr. Sawyer's crazy plans. In the end, we managed to defeat him in the secondary lab area of the factory. It was a tough fight, but we took him down. We thought that might be the worst of it. That maybe we'd finally be safe once the Doctor was out of the way. But here's the kicker. Even after defeating the Doctor, everything fell apart. The prototype wasn't going to let us win that easily. Together with Poppy and Kissy, we had come up with a plan to destroy the factory for good. Basically blow it all up so no more evil experiments could continue. We rigged the place to explode. We were this close to victory. And then the prototype stepped in from the shadows and said, nope. At the end of Chapter 4, the prototype set a trap. There was an explosion, boom, and red smoke, just like Catnap's gas, flooded the area. We were completely overwhelmed. In those chaotic final moments, a lot happened all at once. Poppy disappeared. We don't know if the prototype snatched her or if she went into hiding. And poor Kissy Missy. She didn't make it. It's implied that Kissy sacrificed herself or was caught in the blast while trying to help us escape. Even the friendly little toys in Safe Haven were wiped out, either by that explosion or by the prototype's minions in the chaos. And then, to top it all off, guess who shows up? Huggy Wuggy. That's right, the very first monster we faced. Turns out, Huggy survived his fall in Chapter 1, and he came back with a vengeance. In the final scene of Chapter 4, as our character is reeling from the explosion and the red gas, Huggy Wuggy emerges from the smoke, furious and very much alive. Imagine seeing those big shiny eyes and that mouthful of teeth coming at you through the haze. Absolutely terrifying. And then, cut to black. End of chapter. Talk about a cliffhanger. We're left thinking, how on earth are we going to get out of this one? So that brings us to now, on the brink of Chapter 5. Let's break down what we know and what we think might happen. First, the location. Chapter 5 is going to take place in the heart of Playtime Co.'s factory, the lab, also referred to as the single most high-security, high-clearance section of the whole complex. Basically, the deepest, darkest, most secret area. This makes sense. After all the places we've been, the showroom, the game station, Playcare, etc., the lab is where the worst of the worst experiments happened. It's literally the prototype's home turf. This lab was apparently built in secret sometime in the 1990 seconds, hidden even deeper under the factory, likely to contain the most horrible projects Playtime Co. ever cooked up. So, as the player, we're heading straight into the lion's den. Inside this lab, we can expect stomach-churning terrors. This is where the prototype has been hiding and where it's been dragging the bodies of all the toys we defeated. Think about it. Huggy's body, or what remained of it after Chapter 1, Mommy Longlegs after Chapter 2, the prototype's claw took them both. It probably also scooped up whatever was left of Catnap and even Dr. Sawyer. Why? Possibly to absorb them or harvest their parts. There's a strong theory that the prototype is trying to build an amalgamation of toy parts, maybe to create a perfect body for itself. We might see evidence of that in Chapter 5, perhaps broken toy limbs and pieces fused together in the shadows of the lab corridors. In fact, the teaser for Chapter 5 gave a brief hint of a multi-legged figure lurking in the darkness that could very well be the prototype in its new, monstrous form. Now, what exactly is the prototype? Up until now, we've only caught glimpses. A skeletal mechanical arm here, a creepy mention in a VHS tape there. The factory's secret logs described Experiment 1006, the prototype, as something remarkably intelligent, able to observe and learn, and extremely dangerous. It's not just another toy, it's the thing pulling all the strings. In Chapter 3, there was even a scene of Catnap basically worshipping the prototype, like it's some kind of god to these messed up toys. So yeah, the prototype is the big bad of this whole story. Chapter 5 will almost certainly feature a direct confrontation with this creature. We'll probably spend the chapter navigating its lair, dealing with its traps and whatever minions it has left, and eventually face off against it in a final battle. And get this, we'll likely have to do all of that without any of our usual friends. Poppy is MIA, missing in action after the explosion. Kissy Missy is gone. And remember, Poppy stopped us from leaving after Chapter 2 because she wanted us to go to the lab, Playcare. She clearly had a reason and a plan. Now we're here, in the lab, but Poppy might not be by our side like before. There's a very real chance that, for at least part of Chapter 5, we're completely on our own in this hostile, dark labyrinth full of horrors. To make matters even worse, Huggy Wuggy is still out there, and according to some hints, he's now tied into the factory's security systems. What does that mean? Possibly that the prototype or whoever is left in the factory has integrated Huggy into their security measures. Maybe Huggy is patrolling certain hallways like a living security guard. Or his image. Face is used in cameras and sensors. I'm picturing walking into a room and an alarm goes off, and suddenly you see Huggy's face on a monitor, or a bunch of small Huggy toys start squealing to alert the prototype. Or it could mean Huggy has literally been wired up with tech, making him even more dangerous, kind of like a cyborg guard dog version of Huggy. Either way, we know Huggy Wuggy will be back in action, hunting us in Chapter 5, which is a terrifying thought. He gave us nightmares in Chapter 1, and even made a cameo in a nightmare in Chapter 3. So imagine running from him again, but this time in the tight, pitch-black corridors of the lab, while also contending with the prototype's tricks. Oh boy. One small silver lining. We might not be completely alone. There's talk that deep in the lab, we'll encounter some tortured denizens, basically other experiments or perhaps survivors lurking in the darkness. These could be other living toys, or even some of the children that were experimented on, now in some twisted form. The creepy part is, some of these beings might actually help us. Imagine stumbling on a freaky-looking toy creature or half-human experiment that isn't immediately attacking you. Maybe it even gives you a clue or helps you hide from something. They might aid you in your quest to defeat the prototype. But can we trust them? Probably not completely. They might turn on us, or maybe they're only helping us because they want revenge on the prototype themselves. It's that old idea, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Maybe some of these tortured souls hate the prototype and want to see it gone, so they won't attack us on sight. But once the prototype is out of the way, who knows what they'll do? So, while exploring, we'll have to stay on our toes. Not everything that doesn't try to kill us right away is actually our friend. Now, speaking of trust, let's circle back to Poppy herself. The game is named after her for a reason, right? What role will Poppy play in Chapter 5? As I mentioned, she's missing at the moment, but I highly doubt she's gone for good. We have a lot of unresolved feelings about Poppy. On one hand, she's helped us so much. She guided us in Chapter 2. She aided us against Mommy Longlegs. She helped us through the nightmare of Chapter 3. And generally, she's been pushing us to go deeper and finish this. She genuinely seems to want to stop the prototype's madness and to save those missing children, or what's left of them, from the factory. But on the other hand, Poppy has also been manipulative. She literally derailed our escape and has been calling many of the shots, treating us a bit like her pawn to get things done. That makes you wonder, has Poppy been completely honest with us? Or is she using us for some larger goal of her own? There's a popular theory in the community that Poppy might ultimately be revealed as an antagonist, maybe not a cackling evil villain, but perhaps the final obstacle or someone who had a secret agenda all along. Think about it. Over the chapters, we, the player, have grown to trust Poppy because she's the only being in this factory who talked to us calmly and didn't try to eat our face. If suddenly, in Chapter 5, Poppy betrays us, that would be a massive twist. It would actually fit a pattern. She did kind of betray us in Chapter 2 by keeping us in the factory, and in Chapter 4, following her plans led us into a disaster, and she wasn't exactly upfront about all the dangers. What if all along Poppy's endgame wasn't just stopping the prototype, but something more selfish? Some fans suspect Poppy might want to take over Playtime Co. herself, or use the factory's technology to achieve her own ends. We have to remember, Poppy isn't just a doll. She likely contains the consciousness, or soul, or however they do it, of a real person, possibly even a child. There's speculation that Poppy could be the toy form of Elliot Ludwig's daughter. Elliot Ludwig is the founder of Playtime Co. If Poppy truly has the mind of Elliot's little girl, there could be some deep motivation behind her actions. Maybe she wants revenge on those who caused all this tragedy. Maybe she wants to bring her father back or fulfill some wish of his. Or maybe she really is just trying to do good, but her methods are extreme because she's desperate. We've seen glimpses of a darker side to Poppy, like when she calmly said, "I can't let you leave yet," at the end of Chapter 2. It was eerie how cold that sounded, even though it was for a cause. Now, I'm not saying Poppy is evil. She might truly be trying to do the right thing, but just has a strange way of showing it. In Chapter 5, I expect we'll find Poppy again at some point during the gameplay. Perhaps the prototype has captured her, and we'll have to rescue her. That would be a neat reversal of roles, considering we rescued her from a case in Chapter 1. And now we might need to rescue her from the prototype's clutches in Chapter 5. If we do manage to save her, the question will be, what then? Will Poppy actually thank us and help us finish things? Or will she reveal that there's one more thing she needs to do in the factory? Possibly something that doesn't exactly align with our survival. There's also a chance that Poppy could inadvertently become a threat. For example, if the prototype wants Poppy for some reason, say to extract information from her, or to use her as a core for some new experiment, then saving her could become complicated. What if part of the prototype's plan is to merge with Poppy to gain her knowledge or her abilities? That sounds horrifying, but if we fail to stop it, Poppy could end up getting overtaken and becoming part of the prototype. On the flip side, if we succeed in preventing that, Poppy might be damaged or changed by the ordeal. It's a very save the damsel, but the damsel might turn into a demon scenario. One more angle on Poppy. If Chapter 5 does end up being the finale of the story, will Poppy make it out alive? Honestly, I'm not sure. She might heroically sacrifice herself to save us, or the children, proving that she was good all along despite her quirks, or she might survive and walk away with us, leaving us to wonder what she'll do in the new, prototype-free world. If the story doesn't end in Chapter 5, I wouldn't be surprised if the ultimate final showdown ends up being against Poppy herself, as some theories claim. But for now, if we focus on Chapter 5, I suspect she'll still be on our side against the prototype, just that we'll finally learn what her true intentions are, whether purely noble or a mix of noble and selfish. Now, let's talk about the missing children, those orphans from Playcare. This is a huge part of the story's mystery, and probably its heart and soul. We learned that Playtime Co. essentially kidnapped or adopted orphaned kids and conducted experiments on them to create these living toys. Huggy Wuggy, Mommy Longlegs, Catnap, maybe others. There's a very real possibility that these monsters are actually those children, transformed and twisted by science. That's super dark and sad when you think about it. In Chapter 3, Poppy's primary goal, and Ollie's, it seemed, was to restore power to Playcare, perhaps to find or help any children who might still be alive down there. We've heard references to the children in tapes and notes, their laughter, their voices in experiments, and then their sudden disappearance from the world. By Chapter 5, I suspect we might actually find some of those missing kids, or at least find out exactly what happened to them. The lab is the most likely place where they'd be, maybe kept in stasis pods or locked in cells, used as raw material for experiments. It's possible some are still alive, though possibly mutated or traumatized. These could be the tortured denizens I mentioned earlier. A major objective in Chapter 5 could be saving the orphans that are savable. Imagine at some point, we come across a room full of small containment pods, and inside are children or human-like figures, weakly calling out. That would instantly raise the stakes and make us, the player, even more determined to defeat the prototype and get these kids out of there. It would also put Poppy's actions in a new light. Like, maybe that's why she refused to let us leave earlier. She needed help saving these kids and ending this nightmare once and for all. Of course, since this is horror, it might not be as simple as busting the kids out and everyone goes home happy. Perhaps we manage to free the children, but at a cost. Maybe someone like Poppy or the player has to stay behind to ensure the prototype is destroyed. Or maybe we think we saved them, but then one of the kids opens their eyes and they glow or they start to smile creepily. Implying something is still very wrong. Imagine the trauma or conditioning might not wear off easily. There are many ways this could play out, from bittersweet to downright grim. But I do hope part of Chapter 5's story is to give some resolution to the fates of those children, because that's been one of the darkest mysteries in the game. Now, beyond the immediate chaos of Chapter 5, here's another burning question. Is Chapter 5 really the final chapter of Poppy Playtime? This has been a hot topic among fans. On one hand, Chapter 5 has all the hallmarks of a grand finale. We're literally going into the final secret area of the factory. We're confronting the main villain, the prototype, directly. Many of the major threats we met, Huggy, Mommy, the Doctor, etc., have been defeated or will be dealt with by then. It feels like everything has been building up to this epic showdown and resolution. A lot of games of this style, for example Bendy and the Ink Machine, wrapped up their story in 5 chapters. So it wouldn't be surprising if Poppy Playtime does the same. However, there's a twist. The developers Mob Entertainment at one point hinted that they had plans for many more chapters, possibly up to 10 chapters in total for Poppy Playtime. Now, that was mentioned quite early on, and plans can change over time, especially if the story naturally wraps up sooner or if the scope changes. If the 10-chapter idea is still in play, then Chapter 5 would definitely not be the end. It would be maybe the end of a major arc, but with more to come. Some fans think that even if the prototype is defeated in Chapter 5, the ending might set up a new antagonist or a continuation that leads into Chapter 6. One interesting continuation theory I've seen: what if, after the prototype is gone, the founder, Elliot Ludwig, returns? Maybe not as a regular human, since presumably he's either dead or very old by 2000s. But imagine, at the end of Chapter 5, a figure steps out of the shadows, and it's revealed to be Elliot. Perhaps he's been alive in hiding, or maybe he uploaded his mind into another toy or machine. It could even turn out that the letter which lured us to the factory in Chapter 1 was written by Elliot himself to bring someone in to help. If Elliot shows up, that would be a crazy cliffhanger to lead into another chapter or sequel. Another possibility for a tease. After dealing with Prototype, maybe Poppy does something surprising, like taking control of the factory's systems or revealing she had a backup plan, thus setting her up as a potential new villain or major player for a future chapter. There are also some story threads that wouldn't be fully resolved even if Prototype is defeated and the kids are saved. For example, what about the high-ranking employees like Leith Pierre, Stella Graber, or Eddie Ritterman, names we've heard in tapes? Are they all dead, or could some of them be alive or involved in a cover-up? There was also the big event, called the Hour of Joy, mentioned in the lore, that appears to have been the moment when everything went horribly wrong in the factory. Possibly when the toys rebelled and the experiments broke loose. If Chapter 5 focuses on beating Prototype and saving kids, a potential Chapter 6 might focus on escaping the facility and exposing what happened to the outside world, or confronting any remaining human antagonists, maybe a government cleanup crew, or surviving scientists who were hiding. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Most signs suggest that Chapter 5 is intended to provide a satisfying conclusion to the main storyline. The teaser trailer literally positions it as a confrontation with the puppet master behind it all. That sounds pretty final for the current saga. We can expect a climactic final boss fight, likely multi-stage, against the Prototype. It wouldn't surprise me if Huggy Wuggy gets involved in that fight too. For example, maybe the Prototype sends Huggy after us one more time as a distraction during the finale, or even more insane, maybe the Prototype merges with Huggy and possibly other toy parts to form some gigantic uber monster for the final battle. That could be the multi-legged thing we glimpsed. Could be Prototype outfitted with pieces of Huggy, Mommy, Catnap, etc. A horrifying amalgam of all our old foes in one entity. Whatever the case, the final battle will probably be epic and intense. I suspect it will also involve us trying to save Poppy and possibly the children during the chaos. Imagine fighting off the Prototype while also making sure to hit some switches to release the kids or solve a puzzle to unhook Poppy from a machine. Now, how might we actually defeat the Prototype? This is tricky because the Prototype is smart and has backup plans, but every villain has a weakness. Perhaps the lab itself holds the key, like some kind of kill switch or device that can disable the Prototype's tech. Maybe the Prototype relies on absorbing others to sustain itself. So if we cut off its power or stop it from getting new parts, it could weaken. We tried using explosives in Chapter 4 to destroy the factory, and that was thwarted. But maybe in Chapter 5 we'll have another chance to blow things up, this time making sure the Prototype is caught in the blast. A classic ending could be triggering a self-destruct in the lab after ensuring we can escape. I have a feeling we might do something like overload the Prototype with electrical power or physically trap it in something. Perhaps the grab pack gets a new upgrade that allows us to do something wild, like magnetically rip pieces off the Prototype. However it happens, I'm crossing my fingers that we get the satisfaction of seeing that evil contraption meet its end. And what about us, the player character? Will we finally get some hint about who we are? The game has kept our identity very minimal. We're just an ex-employee who got a letter drawing us back, but some fans speculate we might have a deeper connection. For instance, there's a theory that the player might actually be someone named Rich, an employee mentioned in a Chapter 2 tape, or even one of the children who escaped long ago and grew up. The game hasn't confirmed any of this, but it would be a cool twist if at the end, maybe Poppy or Elliot, if he appears, calls us by name, revealing that we weren't just a random nobody. Even if they don't do that, simply surviving and getting out of the factory will be a victory for our character. I'm personally very curious if they'll address the protagonist's backstory in the end or leave it mysterious. Let's imagine the climactic scene for a moment. You're in the deepest chamber of the lab. Alarms are blaring, red lights flashing. The Prototype reveals itself at last, a mass of metal limbs and toy parts fused together, with glowing eyes peering from the dark. It scuttles around like a giant spider made of toys and machinery, screeching in a distorted mix of voices. If you listen closely, maybe you can hear echoes of Mommy Longlegs' laughter or Huggy's growl in its cries. How creepy would that be? You're trying to dodge its swinging arms while using your grab pack to hit switches or yank parts off of it. Perhaps you need to solve one last puzzle under pressure, like redirecting power to something that can damage the Prototype. Meanwhile, maybe you spot Poppy trapped in a cage or strapped to a device, and freeing her is part of the objective. At some point, Huggy Wuggy might leap into the fray, either as an independent threat or as part of the Prototype if it absorbed him. It's utter chaos, the hardest fight of the game, but you persevere. Maybe you manage to overload the Prototype's core by zapping it with electricity or cause some big machine to collapse onto it. Or perhaps you attach multiple grab pack cables to its limbs and, with a mighty pull, tear the Prototype apart, limb by limb. Imagine how satisfying yet horrifying that would be. The Prototype lets out a final roar and collapses, sparking and twitching, finally defeated. Then comes the aftermath. The prototype is in pieces. Its big mechanical claw lies motionless. The immediate threat is over. You free Poppy from whatever trap she was in. The children, if any were alive, are freed too, huddling together scared but alive. But of course, the lab itself is now coming down. Maybe in its death throes the prototype triggered a self-destruct, or the damage you caused is starting a chain reaction. Fires break out, or perhaps that red gas is leaking everywhere. You and Poppy, and maybe any survivors, have to make a mad dash to get out. It's a dramatic escape sequence, dodging debris, maybe outrunning one last burst of flames. Possibly, Huggy Wuggy isn't quite done. If he wasn't part of the final boss, maybe as you're escaping he makes one final attempt to grab you. That could be a moment where Poppy steps in to save you, or where you finally get rid of Huggy by slamming a heavy door on him, or letting him fall into a pit, for good this time. Eventually, you reach an exit. I imagine something like a massive elevator or staircase leading up out of the underground lab. Everything's rumbling and shaking. You emerge battered and exhausted into the daylight, or maybe moonlight, depending on time. Maybe there are police sirens and lights, as earlier in Chapter 4 we actually alerted authorities. Just speculation, or maybe Poppy called them. Who knows? You step outside, taking in fresh air, the nightmare finally over. The factory behind you collapses or goes up in flames. If the game wants to end on a straightforward happy note, that could be it. You save the kids, you stop the bad guy, cue a sigh of relief, and perhaps a final shot of Poppy giving a grateful smile. End of story. But this is a horror game, and they might want to leave us with one last twist. Maybe as you and Poppy stand in the sunlight, she turns to you and says something slightly ominous like, "You know, there's still more work to be done." Or she might have a strange smile that makes you wonder if she's truly okay. Alternatively, as I mentioned before, maybe as you think everything's done, an unexpected figure appears, like a man in a suit who has been watching from a distance, and we realize it's Elliot Ludwig. He steps forward and thanks you for saving my daughter, confirming that Poppy was indeed his child and hinting that he orchestrated things. That would be mind-blowing and definitely sequel bait, because then you'd have a whole new dynamic to explore, like, what has Elliot been up to? Is he good, or does he have his own twisted agenda? All right, let's step back from the hypotheticals. We've covered a lot of ground here. The journey so far through chapters 1 to 4, the possible big showdown with the prototype, the fate of our allies like Poppy and Kissy, the mystery of the orphans, and even the question of whether Chapter 5 is the end or just the end of a chapter in a larger story. What do I personally think? I feel that Chapter 5 will give us closure on the main arc involving the prototype and the factory's dark secrets. We'll likely see the prototype defeated and get answers to most of our questions. But I also suspect the developers won't be able to resist leaving a little something open-ended, whether it's a hint that Poppy isn't all sunshine and rainbows, or a clue that someone like Elliot Ludwig is still out there. After all, the Poppy Playtime universe has become quite popular, and they might want to continue it in some form, be it another chapter, a spin-off. We already saw a spin-off with Project Playtime, or even a new series. One thing is for sure. Chapter 5 is going to be insane. We're going in without the safety nets we had in earlier chapters. No reliable friend character to guide us, at least not at first. It's just us versus the ultimate horror that Playtime Co. created. The atmosphere is going to be the darkest it's ever been, and the stakes couldn't be higher. I expect to finally learn things that have been teasing us since the beginning. What exactly is the prototype's goal? Why did Playtime Co. start all these twisted experiments? Can Poppy actually be trusted, or will she show a different face when all is said and done? And maybe, just maybe, who are we in this whole story? By the end of Chapter 5, I anticipate being on the edge of my seat, heart pounding, either cheering because we triumphed over the nightmares, or going, wait, what? If they drop some crazy twist in the last seconds. Either way, it's going to be a memorable conclusion to this saga we've all been obsessing over. So, will Chapter 5 be the last chapter? It might very well be the end of the main story we've been following. It certainly feels like the grand finale with the big prototype showdown and the potential rescue of the children. But I wouldn't be too shocked if, after the dust settles, the game sneaks in a hint that the tale isn't completely over. Maybe a new threat looming, or an old character returning. Either way, we're in for a thrilling conclusion to this journey through creepy toys and dark experiments. Alright, that's all the theory and speculation I have for now. We covered why Poppy might not be so innocent, what the prototype is up to, which familiar monsters are likely coming back for revenge, and how Chapter 5 might play out and wrap everything up. All that's left is to wait for the chapter to drop and see which of these theories hits the mark and which ones the game completely surprises us with. Don't forget to subscribe for more.